Coming up.
Now, you don't have to stand there like, Wonder Woman or Superman, right? That's going to be weird. So I remember when I worked at Starbucks, I got this feedback during my annual performance review, and we were talking about, what I wanted to be when I grew up, what my next job was going to be. And they're like, my boss was like, Rob, you just need some more executive presence. And I was like, okay, I didn't really know what to do with it in the moment, and still didn't know what to do with it when I got back to my desk. I looked around and tried to look at all the leaders around the organization to figure out what good looked like. And I kept seeing different examples of success, which was kind of frustrating. So I kept going back to the well, asking my boss, hey, what do you mean by executive presence? I didn't really get much in the way of, from him, what good looked like. So I floundered and, whatever. And it just became annoying and something that I just didn't focus on. I was like, look, I got promoted to director because I was good at my job before. So I'm just going to keep doing that. And I really didn't take the feedback seriously. So here's the thing. You've heard me talk on this channel and a bunch of other videos about The Speed of Trust, a Stephen Covey book that I absolutely love. It's one of my favorite books. I've gotten a lot out of it. And the 9 different behaviors I'm going to talk to you about today are ways to build executive presence, but it's also ways to build trust with other people in your organization, whether it be your peers, people that work for you, or the people above you that are going to make decisions about your future. So they are all high trust habits and something you can easily start implementing in. And if somebody says, hey, you need to work on your executive presence, you can say, these are the 9 things that I'm working on, and here's the examples of where I bring them to life. So again, my name's Rob. I've been in HR a ton of years, like over 27, and I want to talk to you about executive presence today. So let's dive into the 9 different behaviors. So the first one is very simple, but so impactful. And you're going to be like, Rob, why? This is obvious. Why is it on your list? Well, it is because it makes people feel good. And that is, remember people's names. People feel seen and respected when you remember their name. I remember when I worked at Southwest Airlines and I was hiring flight attendants, I met this one person who kind of blew my socks off in the interview. Fast forward, months later, I'm getting onto a plane. There she is, right? She's greeting passengers at the door. And I said, Avanel, hey, how are you? And she was floored that I remembered her name. It's just a trick I picked up along the way because it creates that instant rapport. People feel special that you actually remember them, that they made an imprint on you. When you are introduced to somebody, you say, hi, Jane, nice to meet you. You say their name, that will help you remember it. It also shows that you are detail oriented, right? It's planting these subliminal messages with people, and it's leaving them with an overall really positive impression with you. The best is, you don't want to do this, is look at the do the badge check, right? You're in your office and you're like, hey, so-and-so, how are you? Then you end up looking at their chest, their waist, and then it could get really awkward. Okay, I'm going to have to sit up for this one because this next one is all about body language and honing it to command the most respect when you walk in a room. I talked to one of my mentors a few weeks ago, and I'll link our interview here for you, Cynthia Williams-Young, and she was telling a few key stories that she learned from her father along the way that really made her who she was as not only a human, but also as a leader. And one of those is stand up straight, right? Don't look like this. So you're looking down at people. Don't put your head down. Stand up straight, shoulders back, head level with everybody else. And that is a command pose. Now, you don't have to stand there like, Wonder Woman or Superman, right? That's going to be weird. But you do want to pay attention to your posture. So if you're going into, a meeting or what have you, and I used to get this feedback. I used to sit back in my chair, legs crossed, all the things, and I would slouch lower and lower as the meeting went on. I finally got some feedback about it. Rob, you need to sit up. I felt it was nitpicky at the time, but now I totally get it. It was sending a message that I was bored, I was disinterested, all that type of stuff. When it was absolutely to the contrary, I was very interested. I was just, slouching in my chair, and it was a blind spot for me. So I really focused on how I walked, how I stood up straight, especially when I'm around other people, especially people who could make a decision about me and my future in corporate America. The other thing to do too is when you're, say, talking to 1 or 2 other people, A simple trick is mirroring them, right? So if they're sitting back in their chairs and, kind of slouching, it's a less formal conversation. So you can do that too. But if you are, say, in an interview, right, you kind of mirror that interviewer. Say, okay, they're sitting up straight, I'm going to do the same thing. Whether it's on camera or in person, you should mirror them. So again, it creates that rapport. It's very subtle, but it also gives you a cue of how you can carry yourself in the conversation. And then the other thing too is, I love to talk with my hands. No, I'm not Italian. But think about what you do that's nervous. I used to always play with my badge, right? It was on one of those yo-yo strings right on my belt. And I never knew how distracting it was till I actually saw myself on camera. And it could send a signal to somebody I'm interacting with, whether it's one person or if I'm up on stage or whatever it is, that I'm nervous, I'm fidgety, I'm not confident. Maybe get feedback from other people about what are you doing that you need to stop doing. And maybe it's even a point where you actually have to sit on your hands so you don't do those things that are distracting to others. But keep that in mind. Your posture and your gestures actually send a subtle message to other people that you're interacting with. Okay, number 3 on my list of things to do to increase your executive presence is the SHR method, and that is see, hear, and remember. Now, I am going to say this was probably one of the things that I screw up the most. Sometimes you don't want to make eye contact. It's super awkward and it's really hard to control. But if you go in, if you're meeting somebody for the first time or again, go in for that handshake and look them in the eye. That sends a confident signal that you're in command. Don't let your eyes shy away or and it's really hard. You have to practice it. I didn't listen. I was always thinking about, and I was stressed about it, what am I going to say in this conversation? And I wasn't listening to the other person. You want to make sure you don't interrupt. And that was my thing. I always had the answer or the next comment at the ready, and I would interrupt. And I got feedback from it. I've pissed my partner off from it because he'll be telling me a story and I'm like, but. And so, but I didn't realize I was doing it. That's the thing. And so if you can catch yourself or get feedback from others, catch yourself before you start interrupting somebody else and make sure you really are actively listening and hearing what they said, because then you'll have a more robust, authentic, and organic conversation. And the other thing about interrupting, don't interrupt even if you know where they're going to go. If they've told you the story again, and hey, let's be real. The older we get, especially me, the more likely we are to repeat ourselves. So just let them roll with it. Don't embarrass them and say, hey, you've already told me that, and move on. Let them get through the story again, and don't interrupt even if you know where they're going to go. And then the other thing too is the remember part of this equation here. So it's just kind of like remembering somebody's name, but this is a click down further, and it's remembering an interesting detail about themselves, right? Hey, Joan, it was great to see you again. How is your daughter doing with her horseback riding and the horse business that she has in Florida, right? I'm remembering that detail about her. And it makes her feel special. It makes her feel that I value our relationship, no matter if it's a new relationship or a long one. And I'm just like, I'm genuinely interested in her and what's going on in her life. And people, again, it just plants yet another seed about that you are a genuine person. You're authentic. And, again, you're real. So number 4 on our list, and we've heard this a lot, this kind of was the thing du jour in kind of HR circles in recent years, and that is fostering psychological safety. And I don't want to diminish it, but it felt like it was going around a lot where everybody's like, oh my gosh, we've got to make sure everybody's psychologically safe. And everybody's running around doing something about it, right? So I do think it's important though, because if you are making somebody that you're talking with, whether it's a group, whether it's one-on-one, if you make them feel safe in the moment, then you're going to learn a lot more about them. Matter of fact, I just got a comment on one of my other videos. It was about interview questions. And this person was telling me in the comment they were interviewing for a job. The interview panel would not engage in a conversation. They just wanted it very structured, very controlled. We ask a question, you give an answer, we move on. That's how it was. And I couldn't help but think of all the valuable stuff that got lost in that. I don't want to call it a conversation. It was interaction, because gold is in the details in that situation. So they weren't creating a psychologically safe environment for that candidate. And I think it was a harbinger of what the company culture was like. As a leader, though, getting back to that, you want to encourage dissent. You want people to actively disagree with you. You don't want a bunch of yes men around you, like somebody we know in the White House. But you want people to actually disagree with you, and respectfully, of course, but offer a different opinion that you may have, as a leader, may not have considered, right? Make sure that people that you're working with or work for you are feeling like they're heard, even if you don't take what they're saying to you into account or put it into action. You're still making them feel like what they had to say was of value. When people are making mistakes, like it's people that work for you or somebody you work as alongside of, and they make a mistake, try to treat it with curiosity and not just you did that wrong and pounce on them and make them feel like crap, right? Help me understand how you thought about attacking that problem and why it came out this way. And maybe you can offer some help. Maybe you just really understand how they think, which could inform a different approach with them next time. Be vulnerable with people, right? Own your mistakes. Say, you know what? Hey, I saw you on stage that one time and it just didn't go well, and I feel for you. And tell them a story about when you crashed and burned on stage, as an example. And that will just open up, okay, here's a person I think is successful, and they just told me that they crashed and burned on stage, so they understand how I feel. Now, you as that person need to get better, and maybe this leader that you're talking to can help you get there. But again, that leader is basically inviting them, saying, look, we've all been there. Let's dust ourselves off and try again. So the next one may seem like an odd addition to this list because you think it might be antithetical to building executive presence, but it's the use of humor, and it's the selective and strategic use of humor is what I'm talking about, because humor can diffuse a very tense situation. It shows that you have emotional intelligence. When you use it right, it can really just break the ice of something that's super tense. And I'm not going to lie, it can also go south on you. You throw in what you think is going to be funny and break some tension, and it falls like, as my boss would say, a turd in a punch bowl. Unexpected answers, something that's going to catch people off guard, that's going to make them remember you, is like, wow, that guy is a funny person, but they're also a valuable leader in the organization, and they marry the two. A leader that I used to work with, her name was Mary at Southwest Airlines. She would say the most outrageous stuff and totally get away with it. And I was like, how does she do that? Because like, if I said that, I'd probably be fired. But she knew exactly when to, it was probably an innate skill she had, when to kind of throw out that one-liner or that sarcastic remark or whatever it is. She had it down to an art and a science. One key here, though, is, two, maybe three. Make sure it's appropriate. My mind, as any of my friends will tell you, goes straight to the gutter. I am that 10-year-old boy laughing at something in a meeting that I found to be dirty or double entendre, whatever. So make sure what you're saying out loud, though, keep it clean, keep it appropriate for the workplace. And the other thing, and that's actually more critical in my opinion, is you can laugh at a situation, just make sure you're not laughing at somebody. Laugh with people. So if somebody makes a mistake and they're kind of saying something self-deprecatingly, fine, great to laugh with them. It creates some rapport, that type of stuff. But you don't want to be known as somebody that takes delight or pleasure or sees humor in other people's failures. That could be a cancer to your reputation in an organization, and it will spread like wildfire. So make sure, again, you are laughing with people, not at them. And then humor, when used correctly, can indicate or equal confidence without arrogance. Use your powers for good and not evil, and that power in this case is humor. Okay, we're in the middle of our list of things to build not only trust, but also executive presence. And if you're liking this content, I would be absolutely honored if you would like this video and subscribe to my channel. It really means a lot and it would help me out. Also, let me know in the comments how you're navigating this. Have you gotten that vague feedback about how you need to have better presence or executive presence? And what did you do about it? I'd love to hear some other tips, so let me know in the comments. But the next one is, it's the shadow rule. And It's the shadow rule basically means you need to stop hiding the things that actually make you human, right? So a lot of people, we're taught we want to show up perfect, and we see those leaders all the time, right? They roll in, everything's perfect from head to toe, they say the right things and everything. I'm here to tell you they have got skeletons in their closets. They've fallen on their face more times than they care to remember. So just remember that. And if those leaders actually let you into that and just own and be vulnerable that they have made those mistakes before and everything, that makes them more relatable. That kind of sends a signal like, wow, they're down to earth. I can approach them and talk to them and have a conversation. I don't know about you. I remember seeing executives in different companies I've worked at the mothership, and you walk around and you kind of scurry away because you don't know what to say to them. They kind of seem larger than life. But those leaders that are actually really down to earth, vulnerable about their mistakes, are the ones that, have a crowd around them and people are engaging with them and everything. So what kind of shadow do you want to cast? Do you want to cast one of total perfection that puts a force field around you? Or do you want to cast a shadow of, hey, relatability, vulnerability, where people are coming and flocking to you? The one thing, going back to humor, and this kind of ties the two together, I love to be self-deprecating. And I can't think of anything off the top of my head other than the obvious bald joke. Which, by the way, somebody on one of my videos actually just said, "You're bald." Wow, you have an impressive grasp of the obvious. Anyway, I digress. But if you're making self-deprecating comments or quips about yourself, that's great. That actually invites people in and to kind of laugh with you, not at you. And then they start sharing some vulnerable moments. And then think of the enriching relationships that form out of moments like those. Make yourself magnetic so that people will actually come to you. They'll feel comfortable. They'll feel psychologically safe. All the stuff we've been talking about. And at the end of the day, if you're casting the right shadow with people, they're going to trust you more. Like we talked about a minute ago, that speed of trust, right? This is a high trust behavior, is be vulnerable. Now, this next one is called the practicing the 30% rule. And what this is about is not speaking too much, right? So we've all been around those people that just overtake a conversation. They've always got something to say. They never let anybody get a word in edgewise. And I bet you are thinking of a person right now that you're like, I don't like that person. I don't like being around them. They're actually exhausting. So you don't want to be that person. And here's how. Most people, again, speak too much or too soon. So let silence do the heavy lifting. A strategic pause in a conversation feels long, but it looks thoughtful. It looks like you're very planful and thoughtful about what you say and when you say it. It sends that kind of subliminal signal to people. And leave space in conversations. You don't have to be the one to always be the first across the gate, the first one for their hand to go up or whatever it is. Let somebody else take the stage first, right? And then come in from behind. Really good leaders speak last. Now, in a video I shot a few weeks ago, and I'll link it right here, about toxic managers in the workplace, the number one thing that signals a toxic manager is the behavior of they just avoid conflict, right? They run away from it. They don't want the hard conversations. They don't want to deal with, people on their team having conflict. They just ignore it and hope it'll go away. So if you as a leader are trying to say, I want to build my executive presence, part of that is knowing how to lean into those tough conversations. And it's using a lot of the stuff that we've talked about today, right? Being vulnerable, talking straight. These are all high trust behaviors that will, when you do have a tough message to give somebody, it will resonate and land better with them and come off more authentic and genuine when you give them feedback or whatever the conversation is at hand. Remember, and again, a mentor of mine referenced this book in a video we shot a few weeks ago, is Critical Conversations and really how to have them. So I will link the book in the description. I don't get anything out of it. I just think it's a really great book that you could get something out of. So check it out. But here's the thing. Again, I talked about talking straight, be direct, but don't be brutal, right? This is a high trust behavior, but sometimes being direct will steamroll over somebody. So you have to balance it with some empathy. Use facts and not assumptions, right? I think that's one thing that could derail a conversation very quickly, especially if it's a tough conversation, is if you're basing your opinions or what have you on assumptions that you've gleaned from whatever instead of hard facts. So if you anchor yourselves into the facts, people will absolutely respect you. They're like, wow, they've looked into this. They've really done their homework. They know what the facts are. Don't let fear of discomfort override your need for clarity. And sometimes it's, asking those tough questions that if you shy away from them, you're not going to actually get to where you need to get as far as the conversation is going with a group or with an individual. So make sure, you're going to be uncomfortable, and that's natural, but push that down and ask the question as directly and empathetically as you can. If all of this stuff is exploding around there's emotions are high and all the things about whatever topic is at hand that's causing stress or anxiety, make sure you're keeping calm, right? That's a really critical skill of an effective leader with great executive presence, is that you never let them see you sweat, right? You always remain calm under pressure. Then you're looked to as somebody that is a solution person, right? A solution-oriented person that, they can go to when times are tough because you're fair, you're direct, you're empathetic, you listen to people. Again, all these things play together. So if you are starting to put this puzzle together about how you're building executive presence, these are the things you want to focus on. And again, it helps you build trust. So the next one, and it's the last one on my list about how to build executive presence, is to ask rapport building questions. Real leaders actually ask more questions than they tell. And that's, you'll start to, as now that you're getting into figuring out what executive presence looks like, you'll start to see these come to life in other people that do it well. And a lot of those leaders ask a lot of questions. So instead of saying, hey, how are you? Which can be answered simply with a fine or I'm great, thank you. Ask a better question. Hey, what are you excited about this new strategy we're embarking on? Whatever it is, tie it to something at work, but ask about something personal for them that they can expand on. They can't answer it with a yes and no question. They actually have to engage and give you some more detail, which can then start a really good, robust conversation that you as a leader are gleaning from these people or this person about, hey, you know what? I'm really upset about this new strategy. Can I tell you why? And then you start working in that active listening and understanding and seeking clarity and all that type of stuff. So make sure you're asking those rapport building questions, that you're being curious and not strategic, because people will sniff out inauthenticity coming a mile away, right? And they will look at you like, okay, here comes Rob again. He's going to ask me the same set of questions. And it's just because some executive coach told him to ask these questions. You don't want that narrative out there either. So make sure when you're asking these rapport building questions, you're being very genuine about it. So I've referenced the speed of trust a number of times in this video and several others. So you're going to know that I'm a huge fan, and I get nothing out of this, talking about the speed of trust, right? I just think it's a great book. But Stephen Covey in that book says, trust is the glue of life. And it's the most essential ingredient for effective communications. And if we think about presence, executive presence, communication and trust are at the heart of that. It's the foundational principle that holds together all relationships. So of all these 9 behaviors that we've just discussed, it's not about being flashy. It's not about perfect. It's not about, saying the right things or doing all this. It's about being trustworthy and being authentic. So remembering names, that equals I respect you. So let's review. Remembering names, that shows respect. Listening without interrupting, that shows you actually care. Sharing your flaws shows your honesty. Creating that safe space or that safety creates loyalty. And pausing before speaking actually signals that you're in control. These are habits that will actually build trust over and over again with everybody you interact with in the workplace and outside of the workplace, and you will be seen as one of those go-to down-to-earth leaders that just does this stuff effortlessly. So the core principle of the speed of trust is when trust goes up, speed goes up and costs come down because we're able to cut through all the nonsense that causes us not to get along in the workplace because we don't trust one another. So when we do extend trust and we do trust one another, we can get to more solutions faster, which actually brings down cost. What does this mean for your career? It means you stop second guessing yourself. It means people will stop micromanaging you if they actually trust you. You'll get more done with less friction, and you'll build influence without playing politics. Will the politics still be there? Yes, but if in a trustworthy or a high trust environment, my hope, and I've seen it happen, the politics actually take a bit of a back seat. At the end of the day, executive presence is not just a look, it's absolutely a trust accelerator. So I encourage you, and I'm going to link it again here in the description, The Speed of Trust. Go check it out. It's an easy read. I am confident if you pick it up, it will actually change the way you operate, maybe give you some aha moments. So please check it out. Again, my name's Rob. If you've liked this content, I would really be honored if you would like and subscribe to this video. It really does help me out. And, let me know in the comments. Let me know if you're in a high trust environment and how that's working, or if you're a low trust environment and if any of this stuff has resonated with you. And hopefully the next time you have a performance discussion or it's a development discussion about your personal development plan and the words executive presence come up, maybe you can use what we've talked about in this video today as a bit of a roadmap to say, hey, you know what, boss, you told me I need to build my executive presence, and here's how I'm going to do it. So until next time, I hope each of you are well and take care. This video was recorded and produced by Just Talk Studios, the premier video podcasting studio in Bellevue, Washington. Visit justtalkstudios.com to learn more and book your session today.